You're listening to the Governor's Podcast, which is hosted by school governors for school governors and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governor's Podcast, we have open, honest and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table and leaning in.
Hello, I'm Sharon Warmington and I support schools and academies as a governor, governance practitioner and a clerk. I'm also the CEO of the National Black Governors Network, supporting the education sector in diversifying their governing boards.
And it's Olivia D. Hind here, an under 30, unapologetically black female who is changing the face and space of school governance.
And you're listening to the Governor's Podcast.
Okay, let's get into today's topic.
Okay, this is a big one, so we'll probably have to come back to it at various points. But
Okay.
How can we, as governors, properly deal with policies?
Oh, you know that word is like a machine gun? You know, you hear it and you just feel different policies are firing at you.
Because it's never just one.
It's never one.
And they always just seem to come. It's like there's supposed to be a policy schedule.
Yes.
That's annually or
Yeah.
biannual
No.
or 3 yearly or whatever.
I think those
but
plans
it's
just go
like,
straight out the window.
Oh my God.
Because sometimes you feel like you're just getting all of them in one go. And then when you think you've seen all of them, there's others or there's new ones being written. So how can we, to answer your question initial thoughts from myself would be, one, create a policy schedule and stick to it as best as possible.
Yeah, but remember that legislation sometimes changes, especially
already we can't even plan the plan. The plan is being disrupted.
Yeah, so yeah, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, as best as possible.
Yes.
I mean, there's some statutory ones.
Yes.
So I guess those kind of ones if you don't have a plan in place, the absence of a plan means you sign yourself up for chaos anyway.
But
But
crazy
having
thing
a structure
is,
then you have something to work with, and then you make it flexible.
Mm-hmm.
You're flexible. I think there was there's a quote that I've come across recently, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But it's something about be stubborn with your vision, but be flexible with the details, because then it means that your goal is to have structure with your cycle of policies.
because that's good governance.
Because that's good governance. It's good practice. It means the intention is there.
Yes.
The intention is there. And it means anyone new coming into the organization at least has something as a starting point, has something to work from. I think you do need a designated person to manage policies,
or people, because there are a lot. It's a lot.
like a mini team.
It is a lot to put on one person to be
100%,
responsible. And as
yeah.
clerk, I know that some clerks are sort of tasked with managing policies, which shouldn't be the case, because we're not there operationally to know it at that level. But in terms of oversight and making sure that the right policies are presented to the board at the right time during the year,
of course,
that makes absolute sense. But and there are mechanisms out there. I know that the Key had, I don't know if they still do it actually, a compliance tracker that you could put policies in and it would flag to say, so if anybody can create something,
a system.
A system.
And then share it, please.
Yeah.
Share it. Don't be selfish.
Because you can't get away from policies.
No.
It's part and parcel.
It's like the bread and butter. It's like the foundation of what you stand on, how you follow. Because when you're asking the question, what do we do if this happens? Or what do we do in this situation? you refer to the policy.
Does your policy follow practice, or does practice follow the policy? They both have to
work together.
Because
there's no point having a policy that you don't follow, and there's no point doing things that are not written down, so that if anything happens, you can go back to it and say, okay, this is what we did last time. This worked or this didn't work. And then you adjust, amend the policy to fit what would be best practice based on experience, but you need a framework to work with. It's like having something that you need to put together, but you say, you know what, we're just going to do it without the instructions,
It doesn't work.
And it doesn't work, because then you ask yourself, where does this go and where does that part go? So it just helps to have something to follow.
Yeah, I remember speaking to, I was delivering a workshop to parents. This organisation brought me in to specifically work with parents in communicating better with their school.
Yeah.
With their child's school. And I said to them, going to the teacher and trying to change the policy is never going to happen, because the staff have to follow policy.
Yes.
If you want policy change, you've got to go top down.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen any other way.
No.
And so that's why it's important as governors, especially now in the 21st century, that we look at everything. We don't just roll things forward or roll
just
things
accept
over.
how things have been written previously and just update the tweak here or tweak there. It's really about reviewing policies properly and saying, are they still fit for purpose?
Absolutely.
Are they suited to this current generation? Are they suited to the
students in this school?
The space and the time that we're operating in now. What do we want things to look like going forward? Because if it's not set there in policy, in ethos, in the mission statement, then it means that you will just continue to carry forward.
And then you wonder why you're not
why nothing's changing,
why you can't attract diversity. And that's really, really important, because I was saying to somebody earlier in a conversation that we do due diligence. People, before they join any organisation, in the main,
you check things
you out.
Yeah.
And if you could say that you are forward thinking and your vision could be this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But if your public face, including your policies, don't reflect that.
Yeah. Or there's a mismatch. It's not, this looks up to date here, but this over here that has a higher impact or greater influence, that hasn't changed over there. Meaning you've updated your pictures on your website, so it shows the most recent students, but all the content, the details, there's been no refresh, there's been no review.
It's really crazy, because I remember doing just an exercise, because that's how sad I am, in terms of looking at school websites, just reviewing school websites and seeing some policies are on there, and you can see the highlights that say speak to so and so about this, and so they've literally uploaded a draft policy that's incomplete, or they've cribbed it from...
Hold on, you mean that's an annotation?
Yeah.
Speak to so-and-so to check the detail. I thought you meant embedded within the policy, you would would go to that person. No.
And so it's incomplete, and also just if they've cribbed it from another school, and the school, the other school's name is still in the policy.
You see,
you're thinking,
that is appalling is not the word. It is, but it's not good. It's so bad. I can't think of the word.
No,
but there's no synergy. It means there's no care and due attention.
That is poor governance, because that must have gone through the governing body.
Yeah, and no one checked.
And nobody checked
it.
Oh,
but then this goes to our governors really reading the policies when they're in those paper packs.
Because I do that kind of exercise as if a school brings me in to do an external review of governance, I will look through their policies. And if I see that tells you so much about the school. A skim read
will make something like that jump out, because you're looking, the moment you see the word school or academy, usually the full name of the school or the academy comes before the actual word school or academy. So even if you're skim reading, if you're connected to the school, even just mentally, or, in the space, you look, every time you see that word or reference to the school, you're looking for the school name. If you're seeing any other name but the school that this policy is attached to, that's a problem.
Absolutely. So when my advice to governors, especially new governors, and I joined a governing body recently within the last 18 months. So every policy that comes through, I have to read it in its entirety, and it is long.
It's long.
You can't get away from it, but you have to do that. Whereas for the rest of the governing body who've been there, it may just be an update, so they're familiar with it, and the changes that have been highlighted or whatever.
Not always,
I know.
People, please track the changes. Track them. For the governors who are reading policies every year, every 6 months, every term, however regular the schedule is, track the changes.
Yeah.
Let us know, because when you've got a policy that on its own is 30, 40, 50 pages long, or even 15 pages long, or if it's not new, let us know what is.
Absolutely. That is so true. Because it could just be an update on the staffing names. And one of the things that I do in the private sector when I'm doing policies is I make sure that the organisation don't put an individual's name in the policy. Put the title.
Yeah.
Because then when it comes to making changes, you usually recruit to the post.
That's when you're thinking, as like succession planning.
No, I just hate making changes.
Well, there's that too. But you're trying to work smarter rather than harder,
absolutely.
Right? So especially if the thing that the person's responsible for, it usually falls with the person with that position.
Right.
So then it makes sense. Obviously, if the position changes, then that's different.
And some policies you have to have a named individual, like the safeguarding policy.
Or the SEND. There
are certain things you've got to have, and I understand that.
Or the SENCO. Yeah.
But where you don't need named individuals, just use their role or their job title.
Of course.
Because that makes it easier. When it comes to updating, have a policy schedule. And if you are like an experience that I've got is where a newly formed trust was obviously rebranding and joining with another school. So they had to decide which policies were trust policies and which policies were the individual schools. And so you have a way of creating that schedule, but if all the policies are being reviewed in light of the new organisation, you've still got to stagger the review, because you can't have them all dated the same day.
When that comes round and the people writing the policies, the SLT, the senior leadership team, I'm thinking of the individuals who are responsible for making those amendments. It's a lot of work. It's a heavy workload. And so even though us governors are not having to write the policies, I think reading them gives the SLT some sort of at least they read the work that I've done.
If they don't read them, it is disheartening.
Or at least they've got questions, or at least they've given be careful what kind of attention you give to them, because when you start talking about little details that don't really matter, when you
typos and things like that,
when you're getting into that, that's different. But if you're reading them and you're genuinely asking about terminology that is used, or what does this mean, or particularly if there's abbreviations that have been used and it's not kind of shared what that full
because the
meaning
policies are public as well.
There's that too.
The statutory policies.
You want to make policies
easily understood.
Yeah, that's it. Written in a way that anyone can read and understand them. Because when you think about it, when situations come up, such as panels, exclusion panels, and things like that,
right?
These are things that are sent to parents to read before they come, so that they can know what process they're following and give the best representation for their child. So you want to make things understandable.
It's your behaviour policy, your exclusion policy, complaints, grievance.
Okay, so that's a number of different policies that you've just rattled off there. How do you know which ones are statutory and which ones are school specific, trust level? How do you categorize policies? And I know we said that we will definitely unpick the huge umbrella that is policies in future episodes. I think it needs several.
Absolutely.
Highlighting some of the main ones, but just as a overview or an initial kind of sharing of information based on your own experiences as a clerk, as a governor, just for anyone who is facing policies for the first time or have been in the cycle of it for a while. How do you know which policies are very important? Obviously, all policies are important, but how do you start to prioritize policies, or where do you expect to find them? Is it just in meeting packs, or are there, you've mentioned websites and things like that?
You first of all, if you are proactive, I'd say proactive as a governor, or if you are unsure if your school has all the right policies in place. If you want a definitive list of what policies, statutory policies schools need to have, then the .gov.uk website, the DfE, will have that, and it will literally tell you what the statutory policies are, whether it's for maintained or academy or both. So it does break it down like that. It also goes as far as to make suggestions on the cycle in terms of annually or every 2 years or every 3 years. They will also be clear on which ones need to be published on the school website. So in the governing body meeting, when you are approving policies and you have to, I know that there's this almost like non-approval kind of thing. You don't really verbalize it. It's just a sort of taken accepted, that nobody really.
I guess it depends on what type of governing body you're a part of. Some make it very clear, depending on who's chairing or the style of governance inside a particular school or academy. Some make it very clear. You may discuss it a bit or whatever, and it's like ratify on block or agree on block or any changes. You don't necessarily read policies in meetings.
As a governor, if you have any kind of question or thought or whatever, you shouldn't be afraid to raise it. Just because everybody else is, may have appeared to have read and is happy with the policy, when I would probably argue that have they read them?
You do wonder, especially when you have 6, 7, 8 in the same meeting pack. You see that meeting pack, you open it and you see it's about 400, 500, 600 pages, and a good 50% is policies. How many people have read them?
And it's really, really important.
So
because
ask your questions.
That is part of the challenge. And that is part of understanding your school more in terms of, does policy follow practice? Because then if you are visiting schools, if you are a link governor and something is in the policy and you're not seeing it played out in the practice,
or you're not hearing it in the way, like when a paper is being presented and you're hearing something that sounds a bit off, but then that's probably because they're following their policy, but their policy isn't written in the way that it should, and therefore they're following a policy but not the policy that it should be worded, or the procedure isn't accurate or up to date and things like that.
Absolutely. And that's why when it comes to exclusions, the behaviour policy has to be part of the pack that goes to the parents as well, so that they can see what the policy is
and what the expectations
are. And again, when I was delivering to parents, the first thing I said to them is understand your school's behaviour policy.
Because not all behaviour policies
they're not all the same.
No.
Understand what the consequences are if your child goes to school without their tie or without their blazer or without this, because it'll be, well, he didn't wear his blazer one day. Why has he got a detention or whatever? But if it's in the policy,
and the policies are communicated to the students through school rules. Kind of thing, what is expected of you as a student.
Absolutely.
And so it could be a case of, he was just from what he said, she was just speaking to her friend next to her in class. But that could be a consequence if you've done it 2 or 3 times, and then it then scales up.
Absolutely.
You don't just end up with an hour after school detention. It doesn't just happen unless it's a serious situation. And again, all of that's written in
the
policies.
policy. Absolutely.
So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with those as parents and as the wider school community. I guess the added element of that is considering language barriers and things like that for families. And obviously most of the policies, all of the policies are written in English, and I don't think you really have translated versions, but you may be able to request them or have someone there to read it to you, and hopefully it can be done before it gets to a situation where your child then needs to go up against a panel and you then need the policy to be looked at. So it's things like that schools can look at in terms of, if they haven't already, consider how they're communicating the language in policies and the rules and the expectations of students to those families and communities that have language barriers, so that you're almost doing it before it gets to the more serious stages where it's then required. So I guess it's us as governors not being passive with policies.
There you go. That's it. I like that. Don't be passive with policies. But at the same time,
because
if everything's going fine, then it's fine. But the moment
policies
something
are there
goes
for
wrong,
when things
it's like
go
insurance.
When things go wrong,
you can have insurance and you never need it, but the one time you have a car accident or a leak or something, you're reaching for that insurance certificate.
So I have a question then. Have you ever been in a situation where something has gone wrong, and you as a governance professional and practitioner and someone who does external reviews of governance have advised the school, have you referred to your policy, or what does your policy say? Have you ever had to ask that question and the school is like, I don't know, or it's not there, or it's not? Have you ever found that a policy is incomplete or not in existence in a situation that it would be best?
Apart from when I've mentioned earlier about policies not being complete, they're still in draft to the point where it was 80% not done, or it was crib from another school and I've highlighted the fact that your school name isn't that. I have been in a situation where, as clerk, not so much policies, but sort of the same in terms of reference, where a decision was going to be made and I had to stop it because I was like, in the meeting, right? You don't have the authority to do that. Ooh. You don't have the authority.
The clerk grabbed the mic
to approve that. And it was, no, because if you do, I will minute that's happened, and the minutes are a public record. And so, I think it was a decision that they wanted to come to, and there were 3 governors, but one of the governors was the head. And it was a decision about the head, and I was like, you can't
gotta follow proper authority channels.
I couldn't even believe that I was even having the conversation. In my head, I'm thinking, is this really happening?
I guess I can put a wider question out there for any clerks listening or governance professionals listening. If ever you've had to pick up the mic, speak, and then drop it. Mic drop, you can't do that. Because when you think about it, when you think of those around the table, governors speak, SLT speak, and yet the clerk is the gel, the nucleus for all of that, and yet you wonder if there's things that they know that shouldn't happen or need to happen.
Well, that's why they're there.
If they have the confidence to do that, or if they are respected enough for them to be able to stop minuting for a moment and, interject where necessary, to make sure that good governance is happening, is taking place.
I've been in a situation where I've stopped minuting and I've said, you really don't want me to minute this. And they sort of looked at it and going, you'll be shot. You don't want this to be minuted.
There you go.
I'll start minuting again when you're being strategic and you're ready to make decisions. Because,
so even that, knowing what your position is.
Well, that's the whole point of having a governance professional around the table.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't. I know I'm digressing here, but that's why you can't you can't pay peanuts to such a vital role. You can't, because many a clerk has saved a school from, you know, whether it's an Ofsted judgment that could have gone against them, or, you know, a decision that could have seen them, you know, get into trouble financially. Or
well, the thing is, just as policies, as we've been talking about, are a fundamental part of governance, and the governance paperwork, the tracking of the way that things are executed in school, more so at an operational level, but still there as part of the overall structure. So are minutes of meetings at which policies come up, and therefore it's recognizing that all of these things work together.
You know what the crazy thing is? People's perceptions of minutes is that it's an easy thing to do. And they'll also think, oh, you know, well, she just takes the minutes, or he just takes the minutes, and that's the perception of. But if you don't have a good set of minutes, how can you evidence to anybody, let alone Ofsted, that you are
doing the checks and balances,
that you are setting the strategic vision, you are holding the leadership to account, and you are upholding financial probity?
Because I must admit that I've had in meetings, I've had clerks, and whether I'm chair or not, after we've got to at the end of a discussion point, they've confirmed, so what was the decision on this, especially if discussion's gone on for a bit, or say you're a new chair and you don't know the practice of it. Goes back to that episode we were talking about in terms of with training. Sit down and tell me step by step what I do in this meeting. Not all the usual stuff. I need the practical stuff so that I can turn up on day one and have a clue what I'm doing. But they may pause the chair and say, so chair, we need to actually get a decision. Are you accepting these policies as is? I know some people try to, even though governors have suggested changes to be made, they still want the policies to be formally ratified, and governors have had to say, we cannot do that until after the changes have been made. Otherwise, we're agreeing to a policy as it currently stands, and we think changes need to be made first.
Or it is minuted to say that the policy is accepted subject to the changes.
Exactly.
And those changes are minuted. And
that's where
there you go.
And that's where the minutes are important.
Absolutely.
In relation to policies, because how policies are minuted in that meeting is very important, such as agreed up until the point of changes, or agreed as stands, or will be agreed at the next meeting. You know, sometimes you push a policy to the next meeting because of the level of changes that need to be made. So I think it's just recognizing all these key components that feed into policy. So for governors, policies aren't just things that SLT have written and you skim read, scroll through and say, done. And then it's like, I agree. No, I don't have any objections to it. No, what do they say?
What do they say? Because you can be called on it at any time.
Or you could be surprised. You could agree to something that it could be one line. And then you then hear something 6 months, 2-3 years down the line, and you're like, is that what our policy says? And it's always said that, but you've not read it to really know.
I challenged a line in a policy once, and everyone sort of looked at me as if to say,
as a governor or as a clerk?
As a governor. And everyone sort of looked at me as if to say,
wow.
I
didn't even know that was there.
Exactly.
I didn't even know it was there.
I was thinking, but it's so blooming obvious.
Nah, but it's also knowing that not everyone reads the policies in the same level of detail at the same time. If you think about
I'm a details person.
One, you're a details person, and two, you may have been the fresh eyes to that policy, whereas your fellow governors may have seen that policy come around a couple of years, so they haven't read it the way you've read it, because you're reading it as your first read to create your new foundation for this policy going forward, whereas for them, they're looking for the updates.
And that is why you must refresh. There must be a refresh. There has to be a refresh and a point at which you say, okay, it is 3 years since we've changed this policy. is it still fit for purpose today? Because 3 years is a long time.
Can I tell you something though?
Go on.
So recent local governing body meeting that I was in attendance for, I tell you, there was a policy that got me so hyped. I was so gassed. I couldn't contain my excitement.
Okay, can we define what gassed is for the audience that are in my age bracket?
Excited, happy, proud, like, you know, very much all for it. Like, it just made me smile.
Okay.
Right, you happy with the definition?
You liked it.
Really liked it. Just as you're talking about years of policies in play, uniform policy that hadn't been changed in 25 years. I tell you, when I heard that, I perked up because I'm 27. So if a policy hasn't changed in 25 years, that means the last time it was...
When it was first implemented.
I was 2. So I wasn't even in nursery.
Let alone secondary.
Exactly. Let alone graduated and now a governor in a school.
Yeah.
And so I perked up, and it was a policy that was being presented. It wasn't just a case of...
it wasn't part of the normal cycle,
yes,
as it were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of it was there to be ratified. It was there to have some sort of discussion and a decision to be made because so many changes had taken place.
And do you know what brought about those changes? Was it governor-led or was it school-led?
I think it was school-led,
okay.
I would say, for the most part. What was funny was in the cycle, in the policy section on the agenda, there was one policy that said student voice policy. That was in the cycle. So I believe that was a policy that's existed before. I personally hadn't seen it. It may have gone to a committee that is more aligned with that policy. And then it comes to the LGB as like a wider ratification. But there's like disseminated across the committees. So that one, it's interesting that I saw that one because this one was about uniform policy, and obviously uniform affects students because, you know, you're turning up every day in your uniform. Now, the reason why this policy made me smile to the point where, so we were on a Teams meeting. I raised my hand before the senior leader, who was one of the deputy head teachers at this school, had finished presenting, because I just heard one thing where I was like, I need to raise my hand from now so that I can speak as soon as she's finished to feedback on how I feel about this policy. And there was a line in there because the uniform policy at this school included not just the actual uniform in terms of shirts, ties, or blouses, ties, skirts, trousers, PE kit. It was the first time I heard a uniform policy like that, because usually I'm just the student and you're told what to wear. Yeah. But to see it at a strategic point, actually. I've only ever been a student. You
don't see it as a policy. No. You just see it as
this is your uniform. Yeah. And parents, this is what you have to get for your children. Yeah. So it was very interesting to see it from this side. Before it's then officially agreed, so that parents then are communicated to about the new policy change, the new uniform changes. Anyway, so it was beyond just the clothing. It went on to hair, makeup, jewelry, all the different things.
The uniform policies do usually include.
Yeah, no, but for me, I'm no longer seeing it as a student where it's like, you can't wear earrings like this and you can't have your hair like this. I'm now a governor reading it thinking this is going to impact a generation of students in the school. So it's the fact that it's the same thing, but my angle of perspective had completely changed.
And the whole thing had been dragged into the 21st century.
Yes.
Because if it's 25 years, you're talking about a quarter of a century.
This is why I was getting hyped, because I was almost imagining being a student in the school and getting the new uniform rules and going, rah, I see myself. I like this. So anyway, there was one line in there that I just have to share. Okay. I just have to share. So it said, hair can be worn in any style. Full stop.
Wow.
Hair can be worn in any style. Full stop.
Wow.
Yes. Any style.
I don't think I've ever.
No i.e., no such as, ever. No example, no except, no unless.
Will be
Yeah, there was a length of hair point, but all it says it to be tied back.
Right, okay.
Tied back as requested, or for specific lessons like science and PE and stuff. But it's this bullet point. I'll bring it all the way in. Yeah.
Okay.
We embrace all Afro and cultural hairstyles. We acknowledge that Afro-textured hair is an important part of our Black staff and students' racial, ethnic, cultural and religious identities and requires specific styling for hair health and maintenance.
Wow.
Powerful.
Hair health and maintenance.
Powerful. It's written there and it says we embrace, we acknowledge.
Wow.
That isn't just a rule or a policy bullet point. That is a fully intentional and it's written in a way where it's like, we are inclusive. We recognize the communities in our school. This is our commitment to the image and the community we want to create for our students in our area.
That is phenomenal.
It's the we use for me, because usually if you hear the first one I said, hair can be in any style.
Yeah.
It's almost like an open statement.
Yeah.
But the we.
Yeah.
The we.
That tells me that some consultation, discussion has taken place, because you can't just know that.
No.
And it's the terminology for me.
Yes. Afro-textured.
Afro-textured.
Yeah.
And hair health.
Religious identities, ethnic, cultural.
Yeah.
You can hear the student voice in that. So then seeing the student voice policy in the cycle of policies.
Yeah.
In my feedback, I was like, I see it. Well done. Hats off. No questions. Love it.
Yeah.
Because for me, it made me feel proud as a governor that the school had literally dragged that policy all the way into the 21st century. And it shows a commitment to the equality, diversity, and inclusion. And set a new foundation going forward. And the SLT member who presented that, she defended that policy. She took the challenge. She listened to everyone's points, because there was some challenge around, other elements within the policy, not around that bit. But she heard, she answered, but you could tell that this policy had a lot of discussion, and therefore it didn't just happen, and therefore there was a lot of defending. She knew why things had been written that way, or why
because of
all the consultations that would have taken place.
And that's why it's important to look at things through the lens of race.
Yes.
And because while something may appear to be inclusive, who is it including?
Ooh.
Who is it including?
That point.
Because when you do not proactively include, you are actively excluding.
Can I just mention one more point from this policy, which links to what you talked about, inclusivity? So I mentioned a point about Afro-textured hair, so that obviously covers the Black Caribbean, Black African, those from Black heritage, ancestry. This bullet point I also loved, and this is actually the bullet point I started off with in terms of specifically commenting on. Henna or Mendy is permitted, full stop. Solid statement. I love it. You know why I love that one? I went to a school where a high percentage, I wouldn't say majority, because I can't think of the stats off the top of my head, but a high percentage of the student body were from Asian cultures. And I know I used to get henna as a child, because for me it was just fun.
Yeah.
It was different. It's it's a way.
Do you want to explain what henna is to people who don't know?
Oh, I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to offend anyone by describing it. But
I would describe it as almost like a non-permanent tattoo
kind of.
So it's a series of lines and very intricate detail. It is art.
It is art.
Like lace but it's on the skin.
And it's got beautiful patterns. You tend to do it on your hands.
Yeah, on the palm of your hands.
On the
usually,
palm of your hand. And obviously, some people will have it on their arms, on the outer side, and things like that.
But it's non-permanent. It
fades over time.
But it's part of
culture, Asian cultures, particularly, but other cultures may also use it. So I used to just get it as fun, because my friends were from those backgrounds, and I'll get it done. But I also understand, outside of myself and my own culture, that when weddings are happening, it's usually a part of the tradition to get those to get henna mendi done. And I literally said in the meeting, I said the reason why I love that bullet point so much is because I can imagine there are girls who feel, or not girls, not just girls, but girls and boys, anyone from those cultural backgrounds, who are attending weddings or events, and they want to. They either want to go for everything, or they want to have something, or be like others who are getting it done, but they're thinking, am I going to get in trouble when I go to school tomorrow? Because I know this isn't going to go between now and then, or I have to cover it up, or what if or I have to not get it at all, so then I cannot really fully enjoy myself.
So a school uniform policy is then impacting their social,
outside
personal
of school, activities, etc. So seeing that was like, wow. And it's just the short, very clear statement, is permitted, full stop. Hasn't said has to be underneath school uniform, or clothing has to be hidden, or anything like that. It is allowed. And I was like, that shows you're not just saying that you're changing, that you're inclusive. You are seen as doing it.
You are doing it. You are doing it from policy through to practice. And that, going back to the hair thing for me is, I've got a shaved head. If I was in school, I couldn't have a shaved head. I don't do the hair thing. It's just not who I am. It's never really been who I am. So, talking about the hendy, I talk about lines. The henna
or Mendy. You just blended the words.
Hendy. Apologies. Talking about the lines, it's like when mainly young boys in terms of school get lines done in their hair, and those are style and to a certain degree fashion. But as you say, if they're going to a wedding, at the weekend, and they get that the trim is the thing.
It's so important in the black community.
In the black community, the hair,
getting your trim. It's the confidence it gives you, and I think this is also what I love about this school being so progressive and proactive, because you don't understand how. I can only speak from black culture because that's where I'm from. Getting your hair done gives you massive. A level of confidence, because when your hair ain't right, you don't feel right. But when your hair is all the way together, you feel all the way together. So it's just recognizing that what may seem small in one culture, or what may mean something in one culture, could mean something completely different for a child or a person or an individual or an adult in a different culture. So I love the progressiveness, and it's just showing the power of policies.
Absolutely. The
power that policies have in self-expression and identity, because I think of the growing LGBTQ plus community, and there was a point in the same policy about nail polish, and it didn't specify what color your nail polish can be. So none of this clear business. So that means if you want to come in and have a bit of
the pride colors on
there was no stipulation as to what kind of nail polish you can have. So I can imagine the students in that school think, wow, I can now be seen and belong. Because I'm seen to be, but I belong to this school through my uniform, but I can still express myself as an individual through all these other things that have been mentioned or not mentioned to give me the freedom to be me. And that's what I thought was beautiful.
Wow, that is, I'd love to see schools across the country
really think about
their policies. It's like I know we're labouring this point a bit, but I remember speaking to a group of head teachers, and they were talking about, Sharon, why can't we get black girls to go swimming? Don't they like swimming? I go, they probably do like swimming, but our hair. The chlorine in the water literally
to dry it out and shrink
our
it.
hair.
Yeah.
It makes it brittle, and also we need to moisturize our skin.
Oh yeah, otherwise you're looking at you.
If you can't, well, it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's actually painful.
Yeah, it is.
If our skin dries, it cracks and it's very dry.
We're used to being moisturized.
So I said to them, if you give them 5 minutes before the end of the lesson to get out of the pool.
Yeah.
That gives them enough time to moisturize their skin.
It will change the numbers.
It will make a huge difference. And they were just absolutely gobsmacked because nobody had ever had that conversation with them, or they'd never felt comfortable asking the question before.
And you've mentioned this in one of your training, or several of your diversity training actually. You used the phrase, I don't know if you coined the phrase, but I would say you coined the phrase because the only person I've heard say it, but cultural literacy.
Yeah, I didn't create that.
Yeah,
I'd love to own it, but
it sounds like you did.
But I own it.
The way you be dropping it sounds like you did. But yeah, it's the cultural literacy that is. It's something to be literate on. It's something to research and understand.
You've got to know.
Ask questions, be inquisitive. So. Obviously we seem to be able to talk about policies very easily, so I know we're going to be able to have a series of agenda items on this.
Dissect some
definitely
policies.
Pull out the key ones and others, and obviously any listeners request any that you would like us to look at, or any that you have in your own schools and academies that are not general practice, are not the ones you usually see, not the common ones, because that will be interesting to know as well. So, we like to wrap up with our takeaways, and I believe this is the last episode before the final episode of the season.
I think they call that the penultimate.
Penultimate, yes. And when you think of agendas, I think policies tend to fall towards the end of the meeting, just before your AOBs and when the next meeting date is. So, that release schedule has worked out really well. So what would be your takeaway from the topic of policies and all the different things that we've discussed?
I would encourage governors to be present with policies, not just read them, but to look at them through a diverse lens.
100%.
Now is definitely the time. So, even if it's a policy with track changes that show, the odd tweak or change here, take the time to actually read it through with new eyes, or give it to I would say a younger governor.
Yes.
Give it to a younger governor.
Who's got time to
read it and say, do you think this is fit for purpose for students today?
Oh, who could also do it? You mentioned in a previous episode about, I think this is probably a part of my takeaway following from yours. You mentioned in previous episodes about probationary periods for new governors. Those are people who you can use as almost like a focus group for policy changes or policies that are in cycle, because those are fresh eyes, and they don't have any
don't overload them though.
Don't have any interest. No, if you have 3 or 4 new ones joining soon, or they're in the probation period, you can
give them one each.
Give them one each, and not to say you don't give them to your current governors.
And feedback and put it as an agenda item, not just policy review, these are the policies to ratify, but policy review, these are the policies that have been reviewed, and these are the comments, so that an individual governor speaks to the
You're welcome.
Yay.
You're welcome. It's all good. I like how I just threw out ideas and you tidied it up for me, and then it was just like...
Well, that's what I do.
It's all good. So I guess just to kind of be clear about what my takeaway is I think it really comes back to how policies are disseminated to governors. And I understand that there are constant changes going on. Sometimes changes feel very last minute, and therefore you plan for only 3 or 4 policies in this segment or at this meeting, but then you have a 5th or 6th one. But I don't think I have a different takeaway to what you've said. You talk about being present with policies.
Yeah.
I talk about definitely try to not be passive and just scroll through, because if I had just scrolled through that uniform policy in the 500 plus pages, I would have missed it, which means I would have missed the hype and celebrating the SLT member or members of the team who wrote that policy and worked to get it out in support to support the students. So I think you'll be surprised if you read a policy, you may find something and you're like, wow, I love that, or I could really be a part of the change here. And that's what's important. So yeah, policies don't have to be as much of a burden as we look at them.
I will definitely look at them with a new light.
There we go. There we go.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governor's Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited, and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governor's Podcast. Let's connect.